Chapter 2556, Black Donkey. Chapter 2556, Black Donkey. Thank you, Senior. Everyone bowed in respect to the Black Donkey. If it weren't for this Senior, He-Foam could have easily killed them all before leaving. After all, he was a heavenly venerate, a supremely powerful being. Senior, are we going to let He-Foam go just like that? What if he causes trouble elsewhere? Xiao Yingxiong asked. The Black Donkey chuckled, and said, the old geezer has already reached his limit by ascending to the heavenly venerable tier. It's impossible for him to become a second-tier heavenly venerate. With such strength, how can he possibly engulf a dimension? What an absolute joke. It paused for a moment before continuing. Compared to Hysteria, he's nothing but trash. They all ground their teeth in their minds. This Black Donkey was also a heavenly venerate, right? He was speaking with such haughtiness, and it was truly rendering them speechless. However, this united origin manifestation fruit is genuine. If you ingest it, you can indeed raise your strength, the Black Donkey added. Everyone grimaced as they looked down at the fruit in their hands. This had been produced by a metal tree, so was it truly edible? Won't you hurry up? The celestial fruit has already been cut apart, so each moment that passes is a portion of its essence lost, the Black Donkey shouted. They hurriedly ingested their slice of celestial fruit. Even Wally was no exception. He wasn't a human, yet this didn't mean that he couldn't enjoy the benefits of celestial fruits. They sat down cross-legged, and only the large black dog and the Imperial Void Celestial King remained standing in boredom. The large black dog's eyes darted around, and at some point, he suddenly ran beside the Black Donkey, starting to act all friendly with it. Even though one was a dog and one was a donkey, they got along surprisingly well, and it wasn't long before they started to chat and laugh. In fact, they even wrapped their arms around each other's shoulders as if they were extremely good friends. Ling Han's intuition had been correct. People would often be attracted to those who were similar to them. The two animals were attracted to each other like glue, and it was clear that they shared a lot in common. However, Ling Han didn't have the time or effort to think about this now. He needed to refine the united origin manifestation fruit. To say nothing of the fact that this fruit needed to extract the blood essence of monarch stars to grow, just the fact that it needed to grow for several epochs was already a sign of its extraordinary nature. According to He-Foam, if this fruit fully matured, it could even help a ninth heaven celestial king directly ascend to the heavenly venerable tier. Even though its effects were slightly inferior now, and even though it had been divided into many pieces, it was still a great treasure for low-level celestial kings. In fact, this wasn't a pure celestial fruit in the ordinary sense. Instead, it was more like an alchemical pill. Of course, this kind of refinement technique was also extremely difficult to emulate. After channeling the essence of the fruit, Ling Han quickly discovered that not only could it advance his cultivation, but it could even push the indestructible heaven's scroll to a higher level. However, he only had a single piece of this fruit, so if he concentrated its benefits on cultivation, his physique couldn't be improved. Which should he choose? Ling Han only hesitated for a brief moment before deciding to choose the indestructible heaven's scroll. The physique and recovery ability of Heavenborn and Wally provoked him greatly. In the past, this had been his unique advantage. Now, however, he could only watch on as others also displayed this ability. This worried him greatly. He channeled the indestructible heaven's scroll as he ravenously absorbed the essence of the united origin manifestation fruit. Symbols pulsated on his body, and it was as if he were comprehending the secrets of the heavens past and present. This celestial fruit had required several epochs to grow, so it naturally contained a grand amount of energy. Ling Han spent 39 entire days to completely refine its essence. He felt slight pity, but he also felt quite delighted. After reaching the Celestial King tier, the indestructible heaven scroll was divided into 9 levels. These were referred to as the indestructible Celestial King physique, and each level would correspond to one of the 9 heavens of the Celestial King tier. For example, the first level of the indestructible Celestial King physique would correspond to the defenses of a first heaven Celestial King. However, the advantage of the indestructible heaven scroll was that it trained the physique, something that would always exist and be effective. Right now, Ling Han had already raised his indestructible celestial king physique to the 6th level. This was already quite extraordinary. However, it was still some way off the peak stage of the 9th level. Moreover, the advance of the indestructible heavens scroll wouldn't be affected by one's cultivation. In other words, as long as Ling Han's comprehension ability was powerful enough, and as long as he had sufficient resources, he could completely raise his indestructible celestial king physique by another level, reaching the eternal divine metal level. At that point, his physical body would be as strong as divine metal. Above that level, and the final level, would be the indestructible heavenly venerate physique. However, even the karmic life heavenly venerable had only managed to comprehend half of this level. Even though one's physique would be more powerful than divine metal, it still wouldn't reach the defensive level of first-tier heavenly venerates. However, this couldn't be helped. The karmic life heavenly venerable had died early. Otherwise, he might have perfected this level long ago. My recovery ability has also improved markedly. The indestructible true fluid has also transformed into mist, flowing into every part of my body. It can automatically heal me even if I suffer severe wounds. However, I'm temporarily unable to use rising from the ashes. This pertained to the regulations. He was in the flaming frost realm now, so he needed to tweak the cultivation technique to align with the great Tao of this dimension. Moreover, regulations are only useful up to the celestial king tier. If I become a heavenly venerate, rising from the ashes will become ineffective. Celestial kings were blessed by heaven and earth, and it was because of this that they would have a sliver of a chance to revive. However, heavenly venerates definitely didn't enjoy such treatment. If they died, they would have truly died. Moreover, it seems like my evolution index has gone up a little as well, Ling Han mused. Before, it had already been infinitesimally close to 12. Now, however, he felt as if he had already reached this level. This was because his cultivation hadn't risen at all, yet his battle prowess had gone up by a significant amount. Thus, this could only be reflected in his evolution index. Ling Han was the first to finish digesting the fruit. Afterward, Hua Furong, Ji Wuming, and the others also finished one after another. Worley was the slowest, yet he also cared the least. After all, his body would automatically digest the essence. Since you're all done, it's time to P*SS off, the black donkey said. After tearing open space, he kicked each of them inside. He then stepped in himself. Whoosh! Space knitted back together, and everything immediately returned to normal. They traveled through the void, and it wasn't long before they all tumbled out again. Sure enough, they had already returned to the world's paramount martial academy. P*SS off, P*SS off, the black donkey said with impatience as it waved its hoof. You actually made me wait for so many days. What a bunch of high-maintenance brats. Girl over there, you're also a member of the martial academy now. The last sentence was targeted at Liu Yufei. Liu Yufei was instantly delighted. In fact, she had also screwed Ling Han and the others over, so she had been worried about them seeking revenge. Now that she had become a disciple of the world's paramount martial academy, however, her life would at least be safe. The Imperial Void Celestial King flicked his sleeve before leaving. He was feeling extremely ticked off. The others had also been wounded and gone through hardships, but they had at least received some benefits. As for him, to say nothing of losing a great portion of his vitality, even his ancient bell of Qian had lost a countless amount of its essence. This trip had truly screwed him over. As he glanced at Ling Han, killing intent pulsated in his eyes. This youth. He would definitely kill him, but now was not the time. The Imperial Void Celestial King gave a long roar as he quickly took his leave. Xiaoying Xiong and the others also left one after another. Even though they had gone through significant hardships, they had ultimately reaped huge rewards as well. They had all enjoyed a huge rise in cultivation. Thus, with some cultivation and accumulation, they could advance to the next level. Moreover, they could maintain a high cultivation speed for some time even after advancing. All in all, they had still gained more than they had lost. It was just that, they had failed to kill Ling Han. Little Black, let's go, Ling Han said to the large black dog. Peng. Ling Han was instantly kicked down by a hoof. He looked up, only to see the two front hooves of the black donkey standing on his chest. Flames were blowing from the black donkey's nose as it said, "Brat, whom are you calling little black? Great, I forgot that he was also black." Chapter 2557, Celestial King Graveyard. Chapter 2557, Celestial King Graveyard. Ling Han chuckled, and said, "Sorry, Senior, I forgot about you." This underling was calling the large black dog. The black donkey didn't truly try to mess with him. It quickly stepped off him, and said, "Ju-hung praised you to heaven and back, but after observing you left and right, it doesn't seem like there's anything special about you." Ju-hung. Ling Han was slightly surprised, saying, "Senior, you have a good relationship with Ju-hung?" "Heh, I single-handedly raised that brat," the black donkey said in a smug voice. Ling Han involuntarily glanced at the large black dog as he silently nodded in his mind. These two were definitely identical in personality. They weren't afraid of drowning in their own bullsh** tea. "Brat, what's with that look?" the large black dog and the black donkey instantly exclaimed in unison. "As expected. Did Senior Ju-hung have any instructions for me?" Ling Han asked. The black donkey was slightly surprised, and it replied, "Indeed. The brat Ju-hung indeed told me to deliver some words to you." "You're quite smart, huh?" Ling Han chuckled, and asked, "Has Senior Ju-hung gone to the realm battlefield?" The black donkey nodded, and replied, "Recently, the attacks of hysteria have suddenly become increasingly wild and violent. An astonishing number of heavenly venerates have gone over to deal with it. In fact, hysteria has even launched some new attacks that we've never encountered before, so we've suffered very large losses. Because of this, the high-level heavenly venerates have all gone over to keep watch." "How grave is the situation?" Ling Han asked in a solemn voice. The realm battle was intricately linked with every single person. Once hysteria breached their defenses, the entire Genesis world would fall. "Brat, this isn't something that you should be worrying about now," the black donkey chided. "Aren't you curious about the message that the brat Ju-hung left for you?" Only at this moment did Ling Han say, "Of course I'm curious." The black donkey couldn't help but feel stifled. Judging from the brat's expression, it was clear that he wasn't especially curious. He was simply acting in a perfunctory manner. The brat Ju-hung said that if you're not looking to raise your cultivation quickly, you can very well stay in the martial academy and advance in a slow and steady manner. However, if you want to soar to the 9th heaven in the shortest time possible, you can indeed go to a certain place, the black donkey said anyway. Ling Han's eyes lit up. "What place?" "A very dangerous place. A single misstep can consign you to eternal doom," the black donkey said with seriousness. Not only was Ling Han unafraid, but he became even more excited. "Please tell me, Senior." The black donkey shook his head, saying, "Your reaction is truly just as Ju-hung predicted. You're indeed interested in that place." Ling Han chuckled upon hearing this. The large black dog and the black donkey were like carbon copies of each other, yet he and Ju-hung were also extremely similar people. What did it matter that the place was riddled with dangers? Dangers would definitely be accompanied by opportunities. Moreover, wasn't overcoming dangers and improving oneself the best method of cultivation? "That place is called the Celestial King Graveyard," the black donkey said. "Graveyard?" Ling Han wore a strange expression as he looked at the black donkey. This donkey wasn't telling him to rob graves, was it? It's not a true graveyard. Instead, far too many celestial kings have died there, so it's akin to a graveyard. The black donkey pondered for a moment before continuing, "Millimeter, it should actually be called an unmarked burial ground. Many celestial kings aren't even buried." Ling Han was astonished. Just what kind of place is this? In the beginning, this was a prison that held some of the most depraved and sinister celestial kings, the black donkey explained. Since they were depraved and sinister, why weren't they directly executed? Ling Han asked. The black donkey shook its head, and replied, "Some celestial kings have an extremely powerful background, so many problems will be caused if they're executed." Ling Han fully understood at this moment. In this day and age, people with powerful backgrounds wouldn't be executed no matter how severe their crimes. At the most, they would only be banished and locked up. Of course, this was unless some paramount being acted quickly to execute them in the commotion. However, with the threat of hysteria, everyone's aim was naturally to resist hysteria's invasion. Because of this, they naturally needed to unite their elite forces. They couldn't cause strife because of one or two celestial kings, could they? It's because of this that the celestial king prison appeared, the black donkey said with a nod. It knew that Ling Han had already made sense of the situation. With the passing of time, the number of celestial kings in that prison also increased. Along with it, the prison also expanded in size. That's a land with no rules and no regulations. It's a land that's overflowing with slaughter, violence, and darkness. Perhaps just a single wrong glance can trigger a battle of life and death. At some point in time, a celestial king surprisingly snuck into that place, aiming to train himself. In just 100 million years, he directly rose from the 4th heaven to the 9th heaven. When he reappeared and spoke of his experiences, he caused a huge commotion. Many celestial kings tried to emulate him. However, with more people sneaking in, this phenomenon was naturally discovered by the celestial kings inside the prison. Thus, these people face brutal and cruel slaughter. In that place, celestial kings fall every day. The corpses of celestial kings are littered everywhere. However, nurtured by the blood of celestial kings, that place is also home to more celestial medicines than anywhere else. Brat, do you still want to go? The black donkey looked at Ling Han, continuing, if you choose to go, then you'll be responsible for your own life and death. In fact, in order to prevent heavenly venerates from interfering and saving people, several 7th-tier heavenly venerates came together to form a restriction. This land is easy to enter, but extremely difficult to exit. I also can't appear when you encounter perilous dangers. Only when the promised time arrives can I come over to pick you up. A grin instantly spread across Ling Han's face. Of course I want to go. The black donkey grimaced, and said, you're not going to mull over this for a while longer. No need. Ling Han said in a resolute manner. The black donkey huffed and puffed, saying, it was predicted by that brat Ju Hung again. I've lost again. Ara. You stinky brat. Will mulling over this for a while longer kill you? Flames were blowing from the black donkey's nose. This was a power transcendent above the regulations. In fact, this was terrifying fundamental power. Ling Han, the Empress, and the large black dog hurriedly retreated. Only Wally watched on with keen interest. His eyes gleamed, and it was as if he wanted to uncover the theory and equations behind this power. Ling Han chuckled, and said, I'm truly sorry, Senior Donkey. After venting its frustration for a while, the donkey suddenly chuckled, and said, no worries. As long as I send you away, can't I say anything that I want? In other words, the donkey was going to lie. Fuck. Just what kind of heavenly venerate is this? How utterly shameless. There was a glimmer in the large black dog's eyes, and he suddenly leaped over to hug the black donkey's leg, saying, Brother, Grandpa Dog has finally found an idol. From today on, I'll become your follower. The black donkey was extremely smug. This was the epitome of shamelessness. Ling Han was rendered speechless. The two of them would screw over heaven knew how many people in the future. He turned to the Empress, and asked, what about you? She didn't speak, simply replying with a dazzling smile. Ling Han nodded in understanding. The Empress would definitely advance and retreat with him. Moreover, he possessed a spatial celestial tool now, and even 9th heaven celestial kings would have great difficulty trying to damage it. Thus, it was fairly safe for the Empress and the others to follow him. Of course, this was as long as he could keep himself safe. Brat, you definitely can't reveal your true identity after entering the Celestial King graveyard. The Celestial Kings there have been locked up for far too long, so many of them have gone cuckoo in the head. Moreover, murders occur every day, so all of the people there are crazy psychopaths. They absolutely abhor Celestial Kings from the outside world who go there to train. So, if you're exposed, you'll be hunted by everyone. It'll be useless even if you have 3 heads and 6 arms, and even if you've reached the 9th heaven. With a punch each, they can pummel you into the ground. The black donkey warned him of the dangers. Ling Han nodded, saying, "Rest assured, Senior Donkey. I'll definitely be careful. TSK, rest assured? Just who do you think you are? Are you worthy of my worry?" the Black Donkey said with a snicker. However, Ling Han chuckled upon hearing this. The Black Donkey was just like the large black dog. They were indeed detestable, yet they also had their soft side. However, they would always hide this side of themselves and purposefully speak in a depraved manner. Chapter 2558, Entering the Celestial King Graveyard. Chapter 2558, Entering the Celestial King Graveyard. Ling Han returned to his abode first. His trip to the Celestial King Graveyard certainly wasn't a 1 or 2 day trip. Thus, he needed to organize everything first. Meanwhile, bewitching Maiden Rue and the other women in his spatial celestial tool naturally didn't have any complaints. They were all willing to follow Ling Han. Ling Han went to visit the Rain Emperor, telling him about this situation. The Rain Emperor expressed that he hadn't discovered his own path yet, so he needed to stay in the martial academy to improve his cultivation fundamentals for a while. However, he would definitely go when the time was right. Ling Han naturally supported his second brother's decision. He then went to visit Yi, Yang Xianlu, and the others. He also went to visit Ling Hua and the others, leaving them some alchemical pills. He then set a time limit for himself. He planned to stay in the Celestial King Graveyard for 100 million years. In these 100 million years, he would be unable to leave. He could only wait for this time limit to approach. Only then would the Black Donkey come over to collect him. Of course, if he became a heavenly venerate, he could also forcefully tear open a corner of the prison to leave. In any case, this was indeed a risky decision. Neither the large black dog nor Wally expressed a desire to travel with him. They were extremely unloyal. Ling Han grabbed Wally and had a detailed discussion with him for many days, asking him to analyze his cultivation path. He had explored and walked this path by himself, so it was possible that he was lacking in some detailed areas. Meanwhile, Wally possessed the most comprehensive analytical ability. Of course, Ling Han wouldn't believe Wally's analysis without question. Instead, he would use it as a reference. He naturally didn't have time to challenge the 9 Deaths formation again. However, he heard that Heavenborn had suddenly improved significantly, rising up the leaderboard of the 5th formation by a great amount. In fact, he even rose above Amu and Kenyu, fully displaying his freakish abilities. Ling Han became even more resolute. He definitely had to surpass Heavenborn in terms of cultivation. He would then pummel him and free the karmic life Heavenly Venerable's sliver of divine sense, thereby allowing him to revive. He temporarily put down his animosity with Heavenborn, Xiao Yingxiong, and the others. With the Black Donkey as his guide, he set off for the Celestial King Graveyard. In fact, many disciples of the Martial Academy are in there. However, they definitely won't reveal their identity. So just in case you come across them, you don't need to show any mercy, either. Otherwise, you'll be seeking death, the Black Donkey warned. Ling Han nodded in understanding. Only if he raised his indestructible Celestial King physique to the 9th level could he retreat with composure even against 9th Heaven Celestial Kings. Otherwise, if he were attacked by countless Celestial Kings, he would definitely suffer a miserable fate. This was clear when looking at the Imperial Void Celestial King. He was definitely an elite among Celestial Kings, yet hadn't he been captured when facing off against the tens of thousands of metal chains? Enough ants could bite an elephant to death. This was not to mention the great number of supreme talents in the Celestial King Graveyard. The Black Donkey tore open space. Heavenly venerates truly traveled at a terrifying speed. However, the Black Donkey was still extremely careful because the void was filled with dangers. It was possible that hysteria might attack them. Even though the donkey was a first-tier heavenly venerate, it was still very likely that it would be killed. Fortunately, they arrived at the graveyard without a hitch. Ling Han couldn't help but break out in a cold sweat. Was the title of graveyard not a description only? Why had he been brought to a real graveyard? This is the entrance, dum-dum, the Black Donkey chided. It brought Ling Han to a large grave before raising its hoof to press the tombstone. The symbols on the tombstone instantly lit up. Entering is easy, But exiting is as difficult as ascending the heavens, it warned again. During these 100 million years, you won't receive help from anyone. You can only rely on yourself. I understand, Ling Han said with a nod. Off you go, the black donkey said, giving him a kick. Peng! Ling Han crashed headfirst into the tombstone. His body directly sank inside, quickly disappearing without a trace. Ah, I'm so eager with anticipation. After 100 million years, just what kind of lofty heights will this brat reach? The black donkey said as it rubbed its hooves. It tore open space and stepped inside. The space fissure then instantly knitted back together, leaving only a faint ripple. Several days later, 3 figures flew over. As if they were striding across time itself, they were radiating with a boundless and domineering aura. The 3 people all had 7 ribbons of iridescent light wrapped around them, signifying their level as 7th Heaven Celestial Kings. They were none other than Jiyu Huri, Miao Hua, and Xiaoing Xiong. After digesting the United Origin manifestation fruit, they had all advanced in a short amount of time, reaching the 7th heaven. With their aptitude as supreme monarch stars, their battle prowess was naturally far superior to this level. That brat entered the Celestial King graveyard. With his freakish talent, if we allow him to grow freely, his cultivation level will definitely be above ours when he returns. We have to eliminate him. Moreover, he harbors great secrets, and I suspect that he's been tempered by 6 fundamental powers. Otherwise, there's no way his body art can be so freakish. We'll kill him and snatch this secret technique. At that time, our chance of ascending to the heavenly venerable tier will definitely increase greatly. The 3 of them raised their hands, placing them on the large tombstone. Symbols instantly lit up. The Celestial King graveyard was easy to enter but difficult to exit. Any Celestial King could open the gates to enter with ease. However, what if they wanted to exit? Even 9th Heaven Celestial Kings could only stare on in helplessness. Only heavenly venerates could tear open the restrictions with their own strength. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. The 3 people also entered the Celestial King graveyard. Ling Han stumbled as he was kicked forward. When he stabilized himself, he realized that he had already arrived in a dark and gloomy place. The sky was filled with dark clouds, and the surrounding land was also covered in a rising black aura that transformed into all kinds of eerie symbols. He was in no rush to leave. Instead, he familiarized himself with the environment first. Only after a while did he stand up to observe his surroundings. This was a desolate mountain where not a single blade of grass grew. He unleashed his Celestial King power and advanced in a certain direction. After 3 days, a large city appeared before him. Ghost King City. These were the 3 large words written above the city gates. The strokes of these characters were filled with strength, and they radiated with a domineering but more so wild aura. This was the aura of a haughty and ruthless person with boundless ambitions. Surprisingly, there were people standing guard outside the city. However, these weren't Celestial Kings. Instead, they were ascending origin tier cultivators. Ling Han found this especially strange. Wasn't this a prison for Celestial Kings? However, he quickly came to a realization. There were Celestial Kings who only pursued the pinnacle of cultivation, yet there were also Celestial Kings who only cared about enjoyment. This was a land of slaughter, so it naturally inspired another kind of carnal desire as well. As such, it wasn't strange for Celestial Kings to bear children and have descendants. Halt! Ling Han was immediately blocked as he approached the city gates. Do you have a permit to enter? They asked. Ling Han was already roughly aware of the situation. Upon hearing this, the guards instantly stood on alert as if they had come across a powerful enemy. Someone sent a signal, and a 7th Heaven Celestial King immediately appeared, looking Ling Han up and down. What crime did you commit? The Celestial King asked. Ling Han smiled faintly, and replied, I killed a member of the world's paramount martial academy. I've been sentenced to this place for eternity. The 7th Heaven Celestial King couldn't help but feel astonished. The title of World's Paramount Martial Academy carried far too much weight. Those who could enter were at least monarch tiers, with some of them even being monarch stars or supreme monarch stars. In fact, There were even freaks with evolution indices of 12. A serious expression spread across his face, and he asked, "Whom did you kill? Why did you kill them?" The black donkey had already discussed this with Ling Han. He was called Li Long now, and he had indeed killed a person called Zhao Ting. This information could be found in the world's paramount martial academy. Chapter 2559, Ghost King City. Chapter 2559, Ghost King City. Li Long and Zhao Ting had indeed been disciples of the world's paramount martial academy. Moreover, Li Long had indeed killed Zhao Ting. However, Li Long had been locked up by the black donkey, and he hadn't actually entered the Celestial King graveyard. He was replaced by Ling Han. With a heavenly venerate helping Ling Han create a fake identity, it would be impossible for others to see through him, even if they were a disciple of the world's paramount martial academy, and even if they were extremely knowledgeable about the world's paramount martial academy. The seventh heaven celestial king carefully interrogated him. In this place, they most detested celestial kings who entered to train, using them as whetstones. Thus, the numerous forces had all reached a consensus. If such a person appeared, they would all hunt down and kill them. However, Ling Han's replies were all logical and watertight. In the end, the Celestial King organized a place for him to stay. He would head off to corroborate Ling Han's story. These were the rules. Everyone who entered would have to experience this. Ling Han naturally wasn't worried. Right now, he was none other than Li Long. The black donkey had created a disguise for him, and it was good enough to last for hundreds of millions of years. Sure enough, the seventh heaven celestial king returned after several days, and handed Ling Han a permit. Ling Han was slightly astonished as he held the permit. It was indeed good that his identity had been confirmed. However, this place was clearly a cage, yet it was also abundantly obvious that the people here had methods to communicate with those in the outside world. Otherwise, how could they have confirmed his story? He quickly pushed his astonishment aside. He was here to rapidly increase his cultivation. Nothing else mattered. "Friendly, are you interested in joining the Ghost King army?" the seventh heaven celestial king asked. Li Long was a disciple of the world's paramount martial academy. Being able to enter this martial academy proved that he was no ordinary monarch tier. Rather, he was someone who was destined to become a ninth heaven celestial king in the future. Thus, it was necessary to extend an invitation to such a person. Ling Han smiled faintly, and said, "I've been exiled here, so I'm not in a great mood. Let me familiarize with this place myself." The seventh heaven celestial king nodded, and said, "That's fine too. However, friend Li, once you become familiar with this place, perhaps you'll discover that it's akin to heaven." "Oh, that's right, I'm Xiong Ming," he said in self-introduction. Ling Han nodded, clasping his hands and saying, "Thank you for your interest, Lord Xiong." Xiong Ming took his leave. Meanwhile, Ling Han had a permit now, so he had the right to freely travel around the Celestial King graveyard. Even though the black donkey had told him some information about the Celestial King graveyard, it was a heavenly venerate, after all, so it wouldn't show much interest in a place that locked up celestial kings. Thus, Ling Han needed to explore the intricacies himself. Regarding the situation of Ghost King City, he had learned about some of it from Xiong Ming. Add to that his own exploration, and he was gradually forming a good grasp. Ghost King City was naturally a force. In fact, each city here was an independent force. There were over 29th heaven celestial kings guarding Ghost King City, with the Azure Ghost Celestial King being their leader. Even though they were all celestial kings, there was definitely one among them who was the strongest. This Azure Ghost Celestial King was that person, and he was more so renowned for his vicious nature. According to rumors, he had indulged in slaughter and rape in the past. He had killed heaven knows how many prodigies who had limitless potential, and he had assaulted heaven knows how many female celestial kings. Theoretically speaking, he should have been executed hundreds of times over. However, his uncle was a fourth-tier heavenly venerate, so he hadn't been killed. Instead, he had been banished to this place. The Azure Ghost Celestial King took to this place like a fish to water. He gathered a huge crowd of people who were as debauched as him, founding Ghost King City. Those who submitted to him lived, and those who opposed him died. Even in a terrible place such as the Celestial King Graveyard, Ghost King City was a well-renowned city of slaughter. This place was indeed filled with murder and death. In just 3 days, Ling Han had already witnessed 7 large battles, of which 2 involved the death of celestial kings. In the other 5 battles, there were also celestial kings who became severely wounded. Regarding the spark behind these 7 battles, however, these were all extremely insignificant events. In fact, these were things that could be resolved with a few sentences. Here, however, they could only be resolved with fresh blood. Here, benevolence would be a bane. However, this was also good. Ling Han was here to engage in endless battle. By lingering on the border of life and death, and by being under immense pressure, he'd see his cultivation forced to advance at a rapid speed. Ling Han set off. Staying in the inn would indeed be slightly safer, but this wasn't his intention for coming here. He arrived at the ground floor of the inn, which also served alcohol and food. He ordered a few dishes and also a pot of alcohol. He drank slowly. Even though this was a land of death, the food was surprisingly quite appetizing and delicious. It was said that the meat all came from Celestial King Tyr Immortal Beast. Of course, non-human Celestial Kings could also order the meat of human Celestial Kings to enjoy. Here, there were no rules or regulations. The alcohol was also fragrant, and even though Ling Han was already a 3rd heaven Celestial King, he still felt slightly woozy after taking a few sips. "Brat, my young master wants to meet you. Come with me," a Celestial King said as he appeared before Ling Han. He was a sturdily built middle-aged man who appeared to be around 30 years old. Ling Han was astonished. He had only just arrived here, so he most certainly hadn't offended anyone yet. So, why did some random young master want to meet him? "Who's your young master?" he asked. "So you really are a newbie. You don't even know my young master," the Celestial King said with a disdainful sneer. Ling Han felt speechless. Those who could become Celestial Kings should have been talented and ambitious people, yet this person was relishing his role as a lackey. The Celestial King continued, "My young master is the esteemed Tang Yuan, the only child of Lord Tang Mingbo." Tang Mingbo? Ling Han had heard of this person. Tang Mingbo was one of the 9th heaven Celestial Kings of Ghost King City. Thus, he could also be considered as a ruler of this city. It was no wonder that Tang Yuan was so arrogant and haughty. With a 9th heaven Celestial King as his father, he indeed had a powerful background. However, this still didn't explain why Tang Yuan had suddenly taken interest in him. Why aren't you moving?" the Celestial King asked in astonishment. He had already explained Tang Yuan's identity, yet this brat still dared to remain sitting? Ling Han pondered for a moment. Even though he had the large black dog and Ju Heng, they couldn't help him at all in this place. Heavenly venerates wouldn't enter this place, and 9th heaven Celestial Kings would be pummeled into smithereens if they entered. The Celestial King Graveyard was a lawless land. If he chose to oppose Tang Yuan, it was extremely likely that he would immediately end up at odds with Tang Mingbo. He had indeed entered this place to battle, and it was inevitable that he would battle with 9th heaven Celestial Kings in the future. However, now wasn't the time. Just like a person couldn't become a fatty with a single bite of food, Ling Han couldn't challenge 9th heaven Celestial Kings at this moment, either. Otherwise, he would be beaten black and blue. Refusing would be a foolish decision. So be it. He would head over to see what this Tang Yuan was playing at. Ling Han stood up and said nonchalantly, "Lead the way." The Celestial King was instantly filled with dissatisfaction. Did this person think he was some big shot? He was a measly 3rd heaven Celestial King, worth less than a fart in the Celestial King Graveyard. He was just about to speak, yet he suddenly caught Ling Han's gaze, so piercing that it could seemingly reach his heart. He involuntarily shuddered, with an indescribable cold chill running down his spine. He immediately swallowed his words. Perhaps Tang Yuan could chide such a person. However, he definitely couldn't provoke him. He humphed, and said, "Follow me." He led the way, guiding Ling Han out of the inn and to a courtyard. After entering the courtyard, they passed many rooms and hallways before finally arriving in a garden. Here, several young people were drinking and enjoying entertainment. There were also beautiful women performing graceful dances. With such a scene, who would believe that this was a prison? Chapter 2560, Tournament of Death. Chapter 2560, Tournament of Death. Young Master, Li Long has arrived. The Celestial King kneeled on one knee as he reported respectfully. A young man turned around, glancing at Ling Han with a smile, and saying, "What are you standing there in a daze for? Come, take a seat." He gestured at Ling Han, pointing to an empty seat. Ling Han walked over and went to sit down on the empty seat. However, just as his bottom was about to touch the seat, one of the youths suddenly lashed out. "Pa!" The seat beneath him instantly exploded into smithereens. At the same time, an overwhelming force pressed down, trying to push Ling Han to the ground. The person who had lashed out had 3 iridescent ribbons around him, signifying his status as a third heaven celestial king. Was he trying to establish dominance? Ling Han sat down as if there were truly a seat beneath him. Meanwhile, he easily dispersed the force that the celestial king had unleashed. He then casually retrieved a chair from his spatial celestial tool and put it beneath himself. "Is this how young Master Tang welcomes his guests?" Ling Han said with a smile. "He's so poor that the guests need to prepare their own chairs." Ha 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 ha. Tang Yuan immediately roared with laughter. He looked at the celestial king who had lashed out, and said, "See, Luo Yang, this is a prodigy from the world's paramount martial academy. Powerful just as expected, right?" The celestial king called Luo Yang simply shrugged and smiled. He hadn't unleashed his full strength just then, and he was confident that he could definitely defeat Ling Han if he used his full strength. These wealthy second generations had all been born and raised in this place. Thus, they naturally didn't think much of the world's paramount martial academy. "He's decently powerful," he replied. "This young master especially appreciates young prodigies." Tang Yuan pointed at himself, and continued, "I'll give you an opportunity. Become my follower, and I can guarantee that you can do as you please in Ghost King City. No one will dare to touch a single hair of yours. Hurry up and thank young Master Tang." The youths who were enjoying the performances immediately said to Ling Han. Ling Han indeed wanted to keep a low profile. However, he definitely wouldn't resign himself to becoming someone else's dog. He smiled faintly, and replied, "Thank you for your appreciation, young Master Tang. However, I'm accustomed to being by myself, so forgive me if I want to keep things this way." Luo Yang stood up, and exclaimed, "Li Long." There was a cold smile on his face, and he said, "Don't be an ungrateful wretch. You think this is still the world's paramount martial academy? You think you're still a revered prodigy?" His words were dripping with jealousy. Even though they were all young masters and whatnot, at the end of the day, were they not all prisoners? They could only act as wanton rulers of this small place. They could only be frogs at the bottom of a well. Moreover, they had no other choice. They hadn't been locked here because they had committed some atrocious crime, but they had instead been locked here because their parents were prisoners in this place. They had been born with a stain to their name. They would be trapped here for eternity. Thus, they acted in flagrant and wanton manners, using such methods to express their dissatisfaction and vexation. Moreover, they were all extremely jealous of outsiders. This was because they at least had a choice. Ling Han remained calmly seated, saying, "Are you trying to lecture me? You're asking for a beating." Luo Yang immediately lashed out at Ling Han. "I let things slip the first time, but that doesn't mean I'm a pushover," Ling Han said in a baleful voice. He clenched his fists and unleashed a punch at Luo Yang. Peng! Their fists collided, and Luo Yang instantly moaned in pain as he was sent flying. He slammed into a decorative rock, smashing it into smithereens. Only then did he come to a stop. Ling Han was astonished. This wasn't because he hadn't smashed Luo Yang to bits. He had suppressed some of his strength, and he was very clear about this. Instead, he was astonished because Luo Yang had come to a stop after only breaking a single rock. By his estimation, Luo Yang should have shot through half of the city. This rock was extremely tough. Ha 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 ha. Sure enough, you're extremely powerful, Tang Yuan said with applause. You sent Luo Yang flying with a single punch. You can definitely rank inside the top 10 among third heaven celestial kings. The other young celestial kings were all stunned into silence. Meanwhile, Luo Yang picked himself with great struggle and difficulty, sheer disbelief on his face. Initially, he hadn't believed that people from the world's paramount martial academy would be that much more powerful. However, even though they were at the same cultivation level, he had been sent flying with a single punch. The gulf between them was as clear as could be. However, Luo Yang more so felt a sense of resentment. He had actually been humiliated before so many people. If it weren't for Tang Yuan not commanding him to, he would have definitely called for reinforcements to kill Ling Han on the spot. In any case, it was extremely normal for celestial kings to die in this place. Tang Yuan stopped his applause, saying, "Taking into account your strength, I can permit you not to become a dog. How about this, fight in the tournament of death for me. As long as you win the title of Blood Martial King, I'll bestow you with an ascending dragon pill." "Young Master Tang," the other youths exclaimed in astonishment and jealousy. They involuntarily stood up. Ling Han was also surprised. Was this ascending dragon pill extremely freakish? Why were the youths all acting so shocked? "You don't know what the ascending dragon pill is?" one of the young celestial kings asked as he glanced at Ling Han. "The ascending dragon pill can increase our chance of advancing to the next level. Moreover, its effects can be stacked to reach a maximum of 10%. 10%. Even though this didn't look like much, each step forward in the celestial king tier was as difficult as ascending the heavens. To the majority of celestial kings, they would be trapped at a certain cultivation level for all of their lives. For example, the 4th heaven or the 7th heaven. Thus, to say nothing of a 10% increase in chance of breaking through, even a 1% increase or a 0.1% increase would be incredibly valuable. People would fight tooth and nail for such a pill. It was no wonder that the youths all stood up in shock upon hearing this. Ling Han also came to a realization. No wonder these people could reach the 2nd heaven or 3rd heaven even though they possessed such mediocre aptitudes. They had most likely advanced thanks to ascending dragon pills. However, this ascending dragon pill was far too freakish. It actually had such astonishing effects. Ling Han pondered for a moment before saying, "What's this about the tournament of death? This is naturally a place for battle. Moreover, only by winning 10 battles in a row can one acquire the title of Blood Martial King," a celestial king explained. "However, don't be mistaken in thinking that this is easy to achieve. On average, such a person only appears once every 100 years. Moreover, the celestial king paused as if purposefully trying to frighten Ling Han. "The fatality rate in the tournament of death is 40%. Ling Han cracked a grin, saying, "Sounds interesting. Count me in." He had come here to do battle, so this tournament of death was most likely his best choice. The young celestial kings were all astounded. They had already explained the grave dangers of the tournament of death, yet this person had still decided to join without a shred of hesitation. Just how confident was he? Tang Yuan clapped his hands and roared with laughter. "Very well. Very well. I wasn't mistaken in inviting you, Li Long. If you can obtain the title of Blood Martial King, I definitely won't treat you poorly." Ling Han simply replied with a faint smile. He naturally wouldn't pay much attention to this second-generation young master. "Come, let's drink," Tang Yuan said in delight. He clinked glasses with the others, and it wasn't long before he became slightly drunk. This alcohol was extremely potent, so much so that even Ling Han could barely withstand it with his strength. This was to say nothing of ordinary celestial kings. Tang Yuan was extremely keen, and he immediately made arrangements for Ling Han, marking down a battle in 3 days' time. Chapter 2561, First Battle. Chapter 2561, First Battle. The Tournament of Death was just as its name stated. Since its inception, countless celestial kings had already been killed. Indeed, the stadium in which it was held was the most renowned land of death in the entire city. At the same time, it was also its most popular spot. Upon being consigned to this tournament, one would be in danger of death at all times. Thus, each person would become wild and savage. They would be filled with excitement upon seeing others bleeding and wounded, or even dead. Moreover, the cultivation speed of these people was also especially quick. It was as if heaven and earth were compensating them. Those who had the potential to become a celestial king would all ascend to the celestial king tier at an astonishing speed. Of course, there were also those who were less gifted, and they would quickly become stuck at the mountain river tier, severing mundane tier, and so on. Thus, even though celestial kings were killed all the time, the number of celestial kings always remained consistently high. Firstly, there were celestial kings who had been banished here from the outside world. Secondly, there were celestial kings who were indigenous to this land. Ling Han sighed with emotion. Perhaps only transcendent dimensions could produce such an environment. Otherwise, even taking into account the celestial kings who were battling against the foreign realm, the celestial realm only had several tens of thousands of celestial kings. This was at most the same as the number in this city. It would be foolish to underestimate the difficulty of winning 10 battles in a row and becoming the Blood Marshal King. This was unfathomably difficult. This was because winning the first 5 battles in a row would be easy. However, after reaching this number, the tournament officials would start to target such participants, sending out elites to hunt them down. In fact, in the final battle, they might even send out a Blood Marshal King to battle against them. Of course, the opposing celestial kings would be at the same cultivation level. At most, there would only be a gap of 1 minor tier between them. However, in such situations, one could choose to reject the battle and request a different opponent. However, they could only do this a maximum of 3 times. Otherwise, their streak would be reset to 0. Above the Blood Marshal King, there was also the 100-victory Blood Marshal King and the 1000-victory Blood Marshal King. These titles didn't require a victory streak. Instead, they only required one to win 100 battles or 1000 battles, respectively. In the Celestial King Graveyard, it wasn't only Ghost King City that enjoyed this kind of tournament of death. Moreover, young masters like Tang Yuan would also take pride in having a Blood Marshal King under their wing. They would oftentimes send their Blood Marshal King to battle with the Blood Marshal King of someone else. Tang Yuan had already owned a Blood Marshal King before. Moreover, this Blood Marshal King had achieved 97 victories. However, as he was charging toward the title of 100-victory Blood Marshal King, he had been targeted and killed by the force of another young master in the city. Tang Yuan had lost a lot of face because of this, and it also pushed him to have several fierce battles with that young master. That young master was Lu Li, the son of another 9th Heaven Celestial King of the city, Lu Gaochuan. That young master was also a depraved wretch, and he had poisoned the alcohol of Tang Yuan's Blood Marshal King, causing his battle prowess to fall dramatically. In the end, this Blood Marshal King was unable to escape death. These 2 young masters had already been at odds because of the conflict and animosity between their fathers. After this event, they became even more hostile, breaking into a fight each time they came across each other. It was just that no one else was killed. As for Luo Yang and the others, they were also 2nd-generation young masters. Their parents were either 8th Heaven Celestial Kings or 7th Heaven Celestial Kings, and these Celestial Kings were all underlings of Tang Yuan's father, Tang Mingbo. Thus, they all treated Tang Yuan as their leader. This was an interest group where glory and humiliation were shared. Li Long, if you manage to kill the Blood Marshal King of that bastard Lu Li, I'll reward you with another ascending dragon pill, Tang Yuan shouted in a drunken stupor. He promised Ling Han even more rewards. Ling Han replied with a faint smile. His evolution index had already reached 12, so did he really need any ascending dragon pills? However, he certainly wasn't against obtaining some to examine. Luo Yang and the others were extremely jealous. However, they immediately thought of the immense difficulty of becoming a Blood Marshal King, and they immediately recalled the sly and sinister nature of Lu Li. Once he learned of Ling Han's existence, he would definitely launch a deadly assault. To say nothing of killing Lu Li's Blood Marshal King, becoming a Blood Marshal King was already a profound challenge. It was only a matter of time before Ling Han lost his head. They all sneered in their minds. Would an ascending dragon pill be so easy to obtain? Ling Han didn't return to the inn. After all, Second-generation young masters like Tang Yuan also understood how to win over their underlings. He organized a courtyard for Ling Han, and he even sent over 3 beautiful maidservants to accompany him. However, they were naturally rejected by Ling Han. Even though Tang Yuan was astonished by this, there was actually a man who wasn't interested in beautiful women. This also caused him to hold Ling Han in higher regard. He was filled with anticipation. Tang Yuan was a fairly powerful person in the city, so under his instructions, he disrupted the tournament's original schedule and forcefully slid Ling Han in. 3 days later, Ling Han appeared in the stadium. "Li Long, you need to win some honor for this young master," Tang Yuan said to Ling Han in the resting area. "I've put a huge wager on you, so if you dare to lose, you either die in the arena, or I'll personally kill you and hang your head on the flag in the stadium." After becoming sober, Tang Yuan immediately started to show his cruel and domineering side. Whoever disappointed him would be punished with death. This was his iron rule. Ling Han felt a strong urge to kill Tang Yuan. However, he forcefully suppressed this urge. He promised himself that he would definitely kill this young master before he left the Celestial King graveyard. Did Tang Yuan truly think that he could act with wanton freedom just because his father was a 9th Heaven Celestial King? Tang Yuan naturally couldn't read Ling Han's mind. Otherwise, he would definitely sentence Ling Han to death. Upon seeing Ling Han become speechless, he simply thought that Ling Han had been frightened by his threat. He involuntarily smiled in satisfaction. "However, if you perform well, I won't mistreat you, either. I'll reward you with what you deserve." His tone suddenly changed. After issuing a threat, he then hung a carrot before Ling Han. Ling Han couldn't be bothered responding. When the drums started to beat, he strode out of the resting area and into the arena. Since this stadium allowed Celestial Kings to do battle, its defensive mechanisms were naturally extremely powerful. Otherwise, just a single blow from a Celestial King could obliterate this entire stadium. Ling Han had already witnessed the toughness of the rock here. When he had struck Luo Yang, the latter had surprisingly come to a stop after smashing only a single rock. This was proof enough of their sturdy nature. Was this done by the heavenly venerates to prevent the Celestial Kings here from escaping, and so the rocks and earth here were all extremely sturdy? Ling Han's mind ran wild. At this moment, his opponent appeared from the other end. On the black side, we have Li Long. This is a competitor personally chosen by Tang Yuan, young Master Tang. He's at the 3rd heaven, but his strength is also unknown. "Open your eyes, everyone, witness his strength for yourself," the commentator said loudly. He's already won 4 battles in a row. Today, will Li Long end Ebony's streak, or will Ebony add to his incredible run? If Ebony wins another battle, he'll become a true challenger for the title of Blood Martial King. Is everyone excited? Boom! Everyone shouted in delight and excitement. The audience consisted of all kinds of people, with males, females, old, and young. However, all of them were fervent with excitement, their screams loud and hysterical. "Tang Yuan, is this your new pet?" a young man asked Tang Yuan in the VIP stands. His face was filled with contempt and disdain. Chapter 2562, Poisonous Spider. Chapter 2562, Poisonous Spider. "Oh, you don't think much of him?" Tang Yuan asked in retort. This youth was sitting in the same row as Tang Yuan. Meanwhile, Luo Yang and the others were sitting in the row behind them. It was clear that this youth enjoyed a similar status to Tang Yuan's. He was called Zhao Shuang, and he was also the son of a 9th Heaven Celestial King. Otherwise, he naturally wouldn't have the right to sit next to Tang Yuan. He flicked his gaze between Ling Han and Ebony before saying, "Even though Ebony is also at the 3rd heaven, he's a monarch tier on top of that. It's just that he failed to pass the 9 deaths formation of the world's paramount martial academy. However, his strength can't be underestimated. Moreover, he also has a weapon from the technology realm, the insanely powerful demonic saw. It's because of this that he was able to kill a disciple of the martial academy. However, it was because they didn't want to enrage the heavenly venerate of that realm that they banished him here. However, your pet is completely unremarkable. As such, how can he rival Ebony?" Tang Yuan roared with laughter, and said, "Why don't we make a bet?" "Using what?" Zhao Shuang asked. He didn't back down. "We'll wager 3 Brahmin celestial flowers," Tang Yuan said after pondering for a brief moment. Zhao Shuang's eyes instantly lit up. "Tang Yuan, you're that confident?" Brahmin celestial flowers were incredibly valuable. Even though Tang Yuan could produce some, he would definitely feel pained for some time. In fact, he had already lost a huge sum when his blood martial king had lost a while ago. He was already a poor sod, yet he still dared to make such a large wager. He was that confident. However, after glancing at Ling Han again, Zhao Shuang smiled and said, "Deal." He couldn't see any redeeming features in Ling Han at all. He simply thought that Tang Yuan was desperately trying to save face. Tang Yuan laughed loudly and said in a calm voice, "This Li Long is a disciple of the world's paramount martial academy." "What?" Zhao Shuang exclaimed in astonishment. Being able to enter the world's paramount martial academy, Ling Han was at least a monarch tier. Moreover, he was definitely an elite among monarch tiers. After all, not all monarch tiers could pass the 9 deaths formation. Ebony was the best example of this. However, after some further thought, Zhao Shuang immediately calmed down. What did it matter that Ling Han was a disciple of the martial academy? Ebony had already killed one. However, Tang Yuan wore a wide smile as he continued, "Do you know? This person was banished here because he killed a disciple of the martial academy." Zhao Shuang was astonished again. Ling Han had also killed a disciple of the martial academy. He couldn't help but ask, "How do you know?" Tang Yuan was extremely smug as he replied, "He only entered the Celestial King graveyard a few days ago, and when entered the city, he was coincidentally encountered by Xiong Jun's father. After receiving this news, I hurriedly invited him over." Zhao Shuang gritted his teeth and said, "Xiong Ming is your father's subordinate. I actually didn't receive any news of this at all." As it turns out, this news was suppressed by Xiong Ming. Tang Yuan roared with laughter. There were over 29th Heaven Celestial Kings in Ghost King City, and even though the Azure Ghost Celestial King was the leader, each person had their own personal interests. Thus, it was inevitable that there would be schemes and trickery, conflict and robbery. "What's so funny?" a seductive voice suddenly said. They looked over, only to see a woman in black walking over. She was wearing a dress, yet not only were her jade-like arms revealed, but even a large portion of her breasts were exposed. Their voluptuous shape was extremely clear. Her dress was only knee-length as well, revealing her pale lower legs. She wasn't wearing shoes, and her dainty pale and jade-like feet were exposed for all to see. Her toenails were painted pink, and it was as if they were blooming flowers. They were incredibly alluring. Her hair was silken and raven black, yet her lips were as red as scorching flames. Her nose was straight and tall, and her eyes carried a faint hint of green. She radiated with a wild allure. A lustful expression involuntarily appeared on Tang Yuan's and Zhao Shuang's face when they saw this woman. However, there was more so a sense of apprehension. They didn't dare to stare at her voluptuous breasts and shapely bottom at all, and they were both as well behaved as could be. This was because this seductive and alluring woman was called Yang Xiaoling. Her father was a 9th Heaven Celestial King, and she was also a 4th Heaven Celestial King herself. If this was all, these 2 young masters naturally wouldn't have been so apprehensive of her. However, this woman was a poisonous spider who liked to toy with men. This wasn't normal toying, but toying with them until they were broken, crippled, and dead. Even though Tang Yuan and Zhao Shuang enjoyed beautiful women, they only dared to salivate over this woman. They didn't dare to touch her at all. "Sister Ling," they said in unison. In Ghost King City, there were 3 second-generation young masters who clearly enjoyed a superior status. Yang Xiaoling was one of them. Yang Xiaoling swayed her hips as she walked over. There were 10 bare-chested men following behind her, each of them tall and muscular. There were ribbons of iridescent light around them, ranging from 1 to 2. These were all her gigolos. She had never shied away from letting others know that she had such a hobby and needs. "That brat is your new pet?" Yang Xiaoling asked as she sat down. She pointed at Ling Han with her slender finger. "That's right," Tang Yuan replied obediently. Even though young Xiaoling couldn't kill him, she could indeed give him a good beating. His father wouldn't cause a huge commotion with the Yang clan because of this. Generally speaking, as long as they didn't take things too far, their parents wouldn't interfere with their skirmishes. Young Xiaoling licked her slightly full lips, causing them to become even more lush and reflective. There was a sense of intoxication and unrestrainedness about them. If this brat obtains the title of Blood Martial King, let me play with him for a few days. It's his honor that Sister Ling has taken a fancy to him, Tang Yuan hurriedly said. Young Xiaoling had already spoken, so even if she broke or killed Ling Han, he still wouldn't dare to make a single peep. Then let's enjoy the show. Here's hoping that he's more than just his handsome appearance, Young Xiaoling said. Tang Yuan and Zhao Shuang exchanged a glance, with both mumbling in their minds. What was the use of being handsome? Men had to be powerful, they had to be influential. These were the fundamentals. In the arena, Ling Han stood 30 meters away from Ebony. This was because the commentator was still babbling away to increase the excitement of the spectators. Shut up. Or else I'll kill you first. Ebony suddenly roared at the commentator. Boom. The spectators weren't frightened by this threat, and they instead became even more fervent with excitement. It was this kind of lawless and audacious person that they needed. They wanted to witness a bloody and brutal battle. The commentator was terrified by Ebony's bloodshot glare. This was a glare flickering with killing intent. He didn't dare to test Ebony's patience. This was because human life was worth nothing in this place. Even celestial kings were treated as nothing. Then let the battle begin, he shouted. Haha, pretty boy, I'll stomp your face into mincemeat and then thrust my demonic saw into your *s, Ebony said as he retrieved a saw. After activating it, the blades of the saw instantly started to spin at a high speed. Ling Han was astonished. This was because the saw didn't glow with any symbols. However, it still radiated with might. This wasn't a celestial tool. He immediately realized this. Instead, it was a product of the technology realm. It wasn't a celestial tool, yet it could rival the might of a celestial tool. This thought flashed through Ling Han's mind. However, what did this matter? With his absolute strength, he could end this battle with a single punch. Die, pretty boy. Ebony roared as he swung his demonic saw. He charged at Ling Han, and with a single step, he already appeared before him. His saw blade spun wildly, emitting an ear-piercing shriek. Chapter 2563 Arrival of Lu Li. Chapter 2563 Arrival of Lu Li. Ling Han felt slightly annoyed. He had actually been referred to as a pretty boy. However, this couldn't be helped. He was disguised as Li Long right now, and Li Long was indeed a pretty boy. He was incredibly handsome, to the point that he could almost be called beautiful. In fact, he was even more beautiful than many women. In his annoyance, Ling Han clenched his fists even tighter. He then unleashed a punch. Right now, he had already forged ahead on his own path. His intent realm had reached perfection, and his physique had more so reached the sixth heaven. Thus, this punch carried a boundless might that was almost no weaker than celestial tools. However, Ebony naturally didn't know this. Upon seeing Ling Han dare to face his demonic saw with bare fists alone, he involuntarily sneered. This brat thought that he could underestimate the demonic saw just because it wasn't a celestial tool? Humph. Only he knew that a small amount of divine metal had been added to the demonic saw during its forging process. Thus, it was sharper and sturdier than most other celestial king tools. What did it matter that Ling Han was a celestial king? If he were struck by the demonic saw, he would definitely lose limbs. In fact, he would be sliced into two in an instant. The spectators in the stands were also filled with anticipation and excitement. The battle had just begun, yet they could already witness blood and gore. They were naturally delighted. Even though the battle would conclude in an instant, all they wanted to see was blood and death. Utter fool. Zhao Shuang jeered. His opponent knew that he had a weapon, yet he still chose to rush over head-on. Just how much did he want to die? Tang Yuan was also astonished. He couldn't believe that the world's paramount martial academy had actually produced such a foolish disciple. He had placed a huge wager on Ling Han. If he lost, he wiped the cold sweat from his brows. Even if Ling Han were truly killed by Ebony, he would still whip his corpse for 10,000 years to vent his anger. Yang Xiaoling snickered softly. As it turned out, this pretty boy was all looks and no brains. There would be no fun in toying with him. As the spectators screamed and whistled, Ling Han's fist collided with the teeth of the demonic saw. If time were slowed down 10,000-fold, one would clearly see one tooth of the demonic saw shattering as it came into contact with Ling Han's fist. Because this saw was spinning, another tooth immediately whipped over. However, it was also shattered in an instant. If time flowed a bit faster, they would hear an endless stream of crisp clanging sounds. If time flowed as normal, however, everything would be over in a flash. Ling Han's fist slammed over. Peng! The demonic saw was instantly snapped into two, with countless shards shooting into the sky. Some even shot back toward Ebony. Pu, pu, pu. His face, chest, and abdomen were all struck, instantly drawing blood. Ah! Ebony wailed in agony. This was a bone-piercing pain. This punch stunned the entire stadium. There was a deathly silence, and only Ebony's agonized wail continued to reverberate. In the next instant, however, a tidal wave of cheers instantly erupted in the stadium. It was as if the spectators wanted to scream until their throats became sore. Incredible! This was simply incredible. Obliterating the demonic saw with bare hands. How enthralling! Come on! Tang Yuan screamed as he jumped up in excitement. Even though he had invited Ling Han, and even though he had high hopes for Ling Han, he had never actually seen Ling Han in action before. Thus, he hadn't known much about his strength. Now, however, he was clear. He was clear that he had underestimated Ling Han. This brat could definitely become a blood martial king. Moreover, he could even defeat Lu Li's blood martial king, helping him win his face back. Meanwhile, Zhao Shuang muttered in regret. Why hadn't a subordinate of his father been on duty at that time? If that were the case, Ling Han would have become his subordinate and been fighting for him. He would have won countless benefits for him. What an interesting pretty boy, Yang Xiaoling remarked as she licked her fiery red lips. There was intoxication in her eyes. Enough with the wailing. Ling Han roared as he charged forward. He naturally wouldn't feel any sympathy for someone like Ebony. Moreover, in a place such as the Celestial King Graveyard, sympathy would also be excessive. Few people deserved forgiveness. He threw another punch. Ebony hurriedly raised an arm to block, yet the shield of regulations and source power on his arm was immediately shattered. His arm was crushed, sending a spray of blood into the air. His bones ripped through his skin, appearing as brutal as could be. Peng! Ling Han's fists didn't stop, striking Ebony's ribs. The magnificent power of his punch reverberated, instantly causing Ebony's body to explode into a cloud of blood and flesh. In an uncanny twist, however, there was no shared grief from heaven and earth. There was no blood rain, either, and it was as if this place had been abandoned by heaven and earth. The spectators faltered for a brief moment before erupting into a tidal wave of cheers. They loved this kind of slaughter. Moreover, this had been an enrapturing punch that had completely obliterated the opponent. However, some people were able to see more. They all observed Ling Han with a profound gaze. To kill a celestial king at the same cultivation level required immense strength. To obliterate their body with a single punch more so required astounding power. This was proof enough that Ling Han was more than just a monarch tier. He was very likely a monarch star. Here, celestial kings were countless in number. Monarch tiers were common, yet monarch stars were much fewer in number. Delightful. Very well. Tang Yuan roared as he jumped up again. He continued to clap, reflecting his immense joy. Not only had he obtained a powerful warrior through this battle, but he had even won a huge sum of money. This double victory naturally filled him with euphoria. Tang Yuan, you've truly struck dumb luck. Zhao Shuang couldn't help but comment. He was feeling incredibly jealous. Tang Yuan wore a smug expression. To second-generation young masters like him, owning a powerful blood martial king would win them a lot of face. After he wins a few more battles, I'll wait for him to serve me in my bedchamber, Yong Xiaoling said as she stood up. With a sway of her hips, she left the stadium of death. Seductress, Tang Yuan and Zhao Shuang said in their minds. They lusted for this seductive woman, yet they were filled with fear and apprehension at the same time. Even if she were served naked on a platter before them, they still wouldn't dare to touch her. The price to pay would be far too great. Our victor, Li Long, the commentator shouted, announcing the winner. Even though this seemed a bit extra, how could a corpse achieve victory? Ling Han exited the arena amid boisterous cheers from the audience. He returned to the resting area. After a short while, he saw Tang Yuan running over. Haha, good job. Very good job. Tang Yuan praised. Come, I've already prepared a feast to celebrate your victory. Sure enough, after returning to the courtyard, Tang Yuan had already ordered people to prepare a feast. Moreover, he had invited many guests. These guests all belonged to the Tang clan's faction, like Luo Yang and so on. Their parents were all subordinates of Tang Mingbo, and they were all followers of Tang Yuan. Many people had been invited, and there were also some female celestial kings. The female celestial kings were all extremely bold, and they continued to make eyes at Ling Han. It was as if they didn't mind participating in a wild adventure with this powerful man. Of course, this would be an adventure with no weapons and death. Ling Han pretended not to notice them. He hadn't come here to muck around with women. Young Master Tang, Lu Li has come. As the feast progressed, a servant suddenly walked over to report this to Tang Yuan. Everyone instantly fell silent. Silent suspense hung over the courtyard. Lu Li was Tang Yuan's mortal enemy. The two powerful young masters had continued to exchange blows, with both achieving some victories and suffering some defeats. The animosity between them only grew greater and greater. Why's he come? Tang Yuan said with a sneer. However, he immediately waved his hand, and said, let him enter. Does he think I'm afraid of him? Chapter 2564, Crashing the Party. Chapter 2564, Crashing the Party. Soon after, the servant brought two people inside. The person in front was filled with a haughty aura, and it was as if he wanted to make sure that everyone knew that he was a second-generation young master. In fact, he seemed just shy of writing "I am super impressive" on his face. The other person kept a much lower profile. His eyes were downcast and solemn, and he looked much like a puppet. When the person in front of him took a step, he would take a step too. Their footsteps were completely in sync. They were both celestial kings, with one having 2 ribbons of iridescent light, and one having 3 ribbons of iridescent light. Lu Li, Tang Yuan said as he saw the haughty person. He wanted to control his emotions and appear as if he had a grasp of the situation, yet he couldn't help but reveal his resentment. This was because he had suffered a brutal defeat the previous time they had clashed heads. Not only had his blood martial king failed to reach 100 victories, but he had even been killed on the spot. This had caused him to lose an exorbitant amount of money. As a result, he detested Lu Li to the core. Tang Yuan, Lu Li said with a chuckle. Because he had gained the upper hand in the previous clash, he naturally felt a sense of superiority. He looked at Ling Han, and said, "This is the new person you invited. He's called Li Long. And what about it?" Tang Yuan retorted. Lu Li ignored Tang Yuan. Instead, he looked at Ling Han, and said, "Become my follower, Li Long." He immediately started to poach the underling of Tang Yuan, continuing, "If you stay with someone like Tang Yuan, you'll only be covering your own luster. Moreover, do you know how your predecessor died? He was killed by my blood martial king," he said in a menacing voice. Lu Li's words were threatening and dripping with malice. If Ling Han didn't follow him, Lu Li would subject him to the same fate as his predecessor. Ling Han would die at the hands of Lu Li's blood martial king. Tang Yuan shook with anger. He pointed at Lu Li, and bellowed, "Lu Li, you're taking things too far." Lu Li roared with laughter. "You're nothing but a defeated opponent. Obediently stand aside." He turned to Ling Han again, saying, "What do you think? Do you want to die a wretched death, or do you want to bathe in eternal glory?" Everyone glared at him in anger. This person was far too arrogant and haughty. He had come to someone else's territory, and he was even trying to openly threaten and poach their followers. He was treating the Tang faction as if they didn't exist. Ling Han completely ignored him. Instead, he was pondering whether he needed to dispose of another second-generation young master before he left. "You truly disappoint me," Lu Li said with a shake of his head. "I initially thought you were a smart person, but by the looks of it now, you're an utter fool." Tang Yuan finally composed himself, saying, "Lu Li, just you wait. I'll definitely make you swallow your own words." Lu Li huffed in disdain. "Tell your brat to become a blood martial king first. Otherwise, he doesn't even have the right to battle with my underling." Blood martial kings could actively challenge other blood martial kings. However, if one weren't a blood martial king, they could only enjoy this privilege after becoming a blood martial king. "This is an easy task," Tang Yuan said coldly. "Tell your blood martial king to clean his neck. It's only a matter of time before his head hits the deck. Becoming a blood martial king isn't so easy. Call me after you pass this challenge." Lu Li flicked his sleeve, and continued, "This kind of feast is so boring and meaningless. What a killjoy. I'm off." He turned around to leave. "You want to leave so easily after entering my territory?" Tang Yuan said in a baleful voice. If he allowed his nemesis to leave so easily, would he still have face to show himself in the future? "What? You want to keep me here?" Lu Li said with a sneer. "Yuan, hold them back." The person who had remained silent this entire time stood still. He then turned around. Clang. A sword appeared in his hand, emitting a crisp clanging sound. The blade of the sword vibrated, exuding an ice-cold killing intent. He was a single person with a single sword, yet he radiated with a domineering aura that could seemingly force everyone to retreat. It was as if no one could breach his defenses as long as he didn't fall. "Kill him," Tang Yuan commanded coldly. He didn't dare to kill Lu Li, but it was naturally no problem to kill one of his lackeys. Even slicing him into pieces would be fine. A young celestial king stepped forward, and said, "I'll go." He was also a third heaven celestial king, and his cultivation was far superior to Tang Yuan's. It was just that his father was inferior to Tang Mingbo. Thus, he could only become Tang Yuan's underling. Whoosh! He dashed forward, and a sword had already appeared in his hand. Like a soaring immortal, he ruthlessly thrust at Yuan's throat. "Remember, you've died at the hands of Guo. Pu." Before he could even finish saying his name, his head had already been sent flying. Blood spurted from his neck. They were at the same cultivation level, yet he had been beheaded in a single exchange. Just how immense was the gulf between them? Most importantly, this Yuan was far too ruthless. The father of the person he had killed was a seventh heaven celestial king. Even though seventh heaven celestial kings couldn't compare to ninth heaven celestial kings, were they beings that third heaven celestial kings could provoke? Yuan retracted his sword. His eyes were frosty and lacking emotion as he gazed at the others. It was as if he were looking at sheep for slaughter instead of living people. Everyone was terrified. This person was far too resolute in his slaughter, not hesitating in the slightest. His aura completely suppressed them. Meanwhile, Ling Han was fairly intrigued as he looked at Yuan. His mind continued to replay the sword strike from just then. In terms of power alone, Yuan hadn't possessed a crushing advantage. However, his strike had been far too quick, so much so that his opponent hadn't been afforded the opportunity to defend. This person was a worthy opponent. Ha ha ha. Lu Li roared with wanton laughter. "Tang Yuan, you still want to compete with me? You overestimate yourself. Before my new underling, can your pretty boy even withstand a single strike?" He strode away, with no one daring to block him. Only when Lu Li left did Yuan finally sheath his sword. He turned around to leave step by step. However, his movements were stiff, and it was as if he were a puppet. However, even though his movements were strange, no one dared to laugh. Instead, they all felt a cold chill grip their bodies. Only when Yuan vanished from sight did they finally feel the warmth in the air. His killing intent was far too powerful. In fact, It was so powerful that it could subtly affect them and petrify their divine sense. Thus, even if their strength was similar, they would still suffer resounding defeat at his hands. Trash. You're all trash. Tang Yuan suddenly howled in rage. He swept his gaze across them as he smashed wine glass after wine glass. Lu Li had specially come to ruin his mood. However, even though he knew this, he still couldn't prevent it. Thus, why wouldn't he be enraged? Tang Yuan continued to smash wine glasses and flip tables. He then turned around to leave. How could they continue this feast? Would he be in the mood to do so? After just 4 days, Ling Han was scheduled for his second battle. According to usual practice, one would rest for a month or so after each battle. After all, it was inevitable that one would be wounded during merciless life-and-death battles. In fact, it wouldn't be strange for competitors to rest for half a year. However, Ling Han's first victory had been far too flawless. He hadn't suffered any wounds, nor had he lost any vitality. Add to that Tang Yuan's pent-up anger, and it was only natural that he wanted Ling Han to become a blood martial king as soon as possible. Only then could he challenge Lu Li's blood martial king. Ling Han's next opponent was a veteran of the tournament. He had participated in over 1,000 battles, though his greatest win streak was only 7. However, to remain alive after participating in over 1,000 battles, and to achieve a winning streak of 7, this person clearly possessed admirable battle prowess. However, it was just that no one invested in him anymore. He simply fought in this tournament to make a living and earn some cultivation resources. Indeed, those who participated in the tournament would all be given a battle fee. The amount would be dependent on their strength and popularity. The person immediately greeted Ling Han with squinting eyes and a wide smile upon seeing him, saying, "Young one, show me some mercy." Chapter 2565, Extremely Shameless. Chapter 2565, Extremely Shameless. The tournament had strict rules against faked battles. Once such cases were discovered, the involved parties would all be executed. Because the owner of this tournament ground was the Azure Ghost Celestial King, who would dare challenge his authority? Previously, there had been a son of a Ninth Heaven Celestial King who had told his subordinate to fight a faked battle for the sake of his gambling stakes, and in the end, this person was directly killed by the Azure Ghost Celestial King, who did not give any face to his old man at all. After this, there was no other profligate young master that dared order their subordinates to fight fake battles. Now, this veteran fighter was asking Ling Han for mercy, but this was not about fighting a fake battle, but rather him hoping that Ling Han could spare his life in the case that he lost. Ling Han smiled calmly. He was not a psychotic murderer, and did not have the hobby of definitely killing his opponents. "No problem. Thank you," the veteran gladiator said, smiling. Looking at the stage. "Hehe, Hu Jing is using this trick again. This guy is the most treacherous. He has deceived a great many people into thinking that he was docile and honest, yet in the end, he would suddenly turn around and attack fiercely, their lives taken easily. This pretty boy should have fallen for it as well. Hehe, what is the use of great strength? Without being clever enough, he would still be going to his death. It can't be helped. He's a newcomer, and doesn't know that one has to be cruel to survive here. Once you attack, you must definitely show no mercy, or you would merely be courting death." Everyone discussed spiritedly. Those who had watched long enough naturally knew the kind of character this veteran fighter was. "Young man, let me teach you something." Hu Jing acted as if he was going to speak to Ling Han, and when he came close enough, he suddenly attacked furiously. A flash of saber light shot skywards. He was indeed, as everyone had said, extremely treacherous. All the words that he had said previously were merely for the sake of numbing Ling Han, and all of it was just paving the path for this strike. A cold smirk curled up the corners of his lips. Why was it very rare for him to battle on the tournament ground now? That was because this trick would no longer be useful if he used it too often. Thus, it was necessary that he come out again and try this dirty trick after an interval of time, when everyone had more or less forgotten about him. With how treacherous he was, he naturally had already come up with a way out for himself. If Ling Han was truly extremely strong, and even such a sudden sneak attack was not able to wound him, he would retreat immediately. There was a safe passage at the side of the tournament ground. Once he entered into this passage, the tournament battle would be halted. Though Ling Han had not taken this opponent to heart, once the battle had started, he would definitely not be careless. Furthermore, his strength had really surpassed his opponent's by too far. The moment his opponent's saber swiped out towards him, the saber light had not even struck him, and he had already reacted, throwing his fist out in a punch. Peng! Hu Jing felt his hands become numb, and he could not even grip the handle of his saber. He was immediately sent flying. He paled in shock. He had not thought that his opponent's strength was so great that it had far surpassed his imagination. Without the slightest bit of hesitation, he immediately broke into a run, and raced towards the safe passage. With how fast a celestial king was, he had already drawn close to the passage in a single leap, but right at this moment, a gentle voice rang out next to his ear. "What are you running for?" Yet when these words were heard by Hu Jing, this was practically as if a spell was pressing him to death, causing goosebumps to rise up all over his body. However, his feet moved even more forcefully, and he was running even faster than before. He felt a weight on his shoulder, and he involuntarily stopped. "Ah!" he roared. A sharp blade suddenly appeared in his hand, and he stabbed it towards Ling Han's ribs. "Brother, don't you think you're a little too out of line?" Ling Han asked, smiling. With a casual swipe of his, this sharp blade instantly fell into his hand. Hu Jing was also smiling, but this smile was extremely forced, and looked even worse than if he were crying. "Brother, don't misunderstand. I was really teaching you something just now. You must definitely keep your guard around certain treacherous villains, who would make use of your kindness." This man's shamelessness was truly unimaginable. Ling Han laughed loudly. "How should I deal with this kind of treacherous villain, then?" Hu Jing's eyeballs spun around madly. He naturally would not say something like he should kill such people, and immediately declared righteously, "You should teach them well. How could they be so shameless?" Ling Han shook his head. "I think it would be better to kill them. End the matter once and for all, and save any future trouble." "Spare me!" Hu Jing screamed. "I have to support elderly and children. If I die, my whole family will be finished." Ling Han was surprised. He already knew that this man was extremely shameless, but he was still shocked by the level he could lower himself to. Sure, right at this moment, Hu Jing suddenly shot out a leg, a kick directly aimed at the top of Ling Han's head, and there was a cold light flashing at the tip of his shoe. A sharp blade was actually hidden in the sole of his shoe. The kick landed, and Hu Jing felt like the sharp blade under his foot had pierced into bone. He was too familiar with this feeling, and had killed who knew how many people with this same move. He was instantly overjoyed, but he had not managed to break into a smile yet when he suddenly screamed loudly. That was because this strike of his had pierced onto his own palm. As it turned out, Ling Han had grabbed his right hand somehow, and then used it as a shield in front of his own face, making it bear the stab from his shoe. Hu Jing was in pain, but was even more panicked. He had used this series of successive final blows, yet Ling Han had still easily dealt with them. This man's strength was of a level that he could not possibly imagine. He broke out in a cold sweat. Now that things had come so far, even he could not believe that Ling Han would still be willing to spare him. Ling Han smiled, and asked, "Any other tricks?" He was very curious about how many treacherous strikes this guy could think of with his shamelessness. Hu Jing was speechless. Firstly, he had indeed run out of tricks, and secondly, even if he hadn't, faced with Ling Han's absolute strength, even he knew that there was no way they would be effective. "No more. This is truly disappointing." Ling Han shook his head, and then raised a fist. "Any more last words that you need me to relay to your family?" Hu Jing did not have any elders or children. These were just lies he had fabricated. In such dire straits, he also erupted in ferocity, and his right hand that was still free struck towards Ling Han's eyes, countless chains surging out of his body. These were chains of regulations that were manifested by Great Tao. He had no hopes that he could kill Ling Han, his only hope was that he would be able to cause the latter some injury. With a casual toss, Ling Han threw Hu Jing out. Peng, his body suddenly exploded in midair, turning into a shower of blood. Naturally, there was no way that this kind of treacherous, shameless villain would garner any mercy from Ling Han. Li Long wins. The commentator announced the results loudly. Everyone was cheering. Both of Ling Han's victories ended with completely destroying his opponent. This had completely satisfied their yearning to see a merciless, cruel spectacle. Yet Ling Han showed no hint of happiness. He killed others not because he enjoyed it, but rather just because he thought that the person in question deserved death. Tang Yuan's mood also lifted slightly. Ling Han claiming 2 absolute victories was naturally as he had expected, but such decisive and clean winning still pleasantly surprised him. Quickly claim 10 victories. Tang Yuan could not wait to suppress Lu Li. He had suffered too many losses in recent days, and felt like he was about to die from the jeering and mockery of the other profligate young masters that were his equal in status. In the next few days, Ling Han would battle once about every 3 days, and they were all one-sided, crushing victories. Moreover, as long as his opponent did not go too far, he would not deliberately take the lives of others, either. 10 days later, Ling Han had already attained 5 consecutive victories. At this point, the subsequent battles would not be so easy. The tournament would deliberately target him, and use all possible means available to them to stop him from becoming a blood martial king. This label was an honor, a recognition of strength, so how could it easily be bestowed? The waiting time this time was slightly longer. 10 days later, Ling Han finally met his 6th opponent. Chapter 2566, The 6th Opponent. Chapter 2566, The 6th Opponent. The 6th opponent was different. This signified that Ling Han had officially entered into the process of attempting for the title of Blood Martial King. In the Celestial King Graveyard, all cities were strictly controlling the title of Blood Martial King. It would not easily be obtained, which truly turned it into a kind of supreme honor. In this manner, once a Blood Martial King appeared, he would win over full rows of spectators. Thus, the tournament authorities arranged a suitable opponent for Ling Han only after serious selection. Before this, even Tang Yuan had not managed to get wind of the slightest bit of information. He had completely no idea who would be Ling Han's opponent this time round. On the black side, it is a rookie that has just recently emerged in our tournament of death, Li Long. The commentator began to loudly praise. According to the data I have obtained, Li Long is a disciple of the world's paramount martial academy. He has been punished with being exiled here due to killing another disciple. Killing a fellow disciple was an extremely serious crime, but when the commentator's words fell, everyone was cheering in excitement, as if they considered Ling Han a hero. Who among the people here had never committed a crime? Whoever was fiercer and eviler and whoever was crueler would be able to win respect. Though Ling Han's crime was not so heavy to the point that it was intolerable, it still made everyone look highly upon him. This guy had good prospects. And now, Li Long has already won 5 times in a row, and entered the stage to contend for the title of Blood Martial King, and today, this is the first barrier that he will have to face. Can he really defeat his opponent decisively and easily with a single punch like he has the last 5 times? Let us wait and see. The commentator paused slightly, then raised his voice once more, and shouted loudly, and now, let us reveal the identity of the sniper, and that is Siang. Boom, instantly, everyone's emotions exploded. Siang, Siang, Siang. They all called out loudly. At the beginning, it was still chaotic, but very quickly, it became a call of unison, neatly coordinated and like a clap of thunder, bearing extremely astonishing intimidation. It looked like this Siang was quite popular. Let the cheering become even more intense, and bring out our sniper. The commentator seemed to have gone mad. On the red side, Siang, a warrior who has once achieved 8 successive wins. Peng. A figure directly leaped in from outside the passage of the tournament ground, landing heavily on the ground, and throwing dust into the air. This was a 3rd Heaven Celestial King. It was only his first sniping battle, and the tournament authorities had not placed such high importance on Ling Han that they would directly mobilize a 4th Heaven Celestial King. Siang was a blue-eyed, blonde man, his body extremely sturdy and muscular, his arms and thighs bared. It could be seen that his complexion was very fair, but he was covered with golden paw hairs, giving off the feeling of a gorilla. He was very showy as he showed off his muscles continuously to the spectators. In fact, he even lifted his top, causing the women on the spectators' seats to erupt in a series of shrill screams. After causing a small climax, Siang exclaimed softly. A silvery light rose from his body, and his whole person actually sank into a silver suit of battle armor, instantly becoming a small giant that was 9 meters tall. The tournament allowed the use of battle armor, celestial tools, and other objects as long as there was a gap of just a single cultivation level. Boom! The cheers were about to send the roof flying. Hehe, it really is unexpected that the tournament authorities would actually take such serious notice of this brat, sending Siang in his first battle, Zhao Shuang said, smiling slightly. He turned towards Tang Yuan. Do you dare to make another bet? Tang Yuan was also slightly serious. Though this Siang had only attained 8 successive wins, he had achieved 8 wins in a row, as many as over 30 times. This kind of battle merit was extremely amazing, or there would have been no way that he would have such great popularity. Furthermore, Siang himself was a 3rd heaven monarch tier, and added with the help of the battle armor, his battle prowess naturally would be lifted another level. Even some 4th heaven celestial kings would not be a match for him. What is it? Scared? Zhao Shuang taunted. You have so little confidence in your own subordinate. A profligate young master like Tang Yuan naturally could not tolerate this. Immediately, he raised his head high, and declared, what would I be scared of? I'm still betting 3 Brahmin celestial flowers. Sure. Zhao Shuang laughed loudly. This was just the opportunity for him to win back the stakes that he had previously lost. Tang Yuan, you had best pray that this brat would be able to keep his life after this. Tang Yuan humphed. It is still undecided who would be killing whom. Let's just wait and see. Ha 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 ha. Zhao Shuang laughed loudly. He felt that he was certainly going to win this time round. On the other side, the commentator said a few words, completely igniting the emotions of the spectators, and then said, and now, let the battle begin. Ha 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 ha, brat, have you washed your neck clean? Have you booked your coffin? Siang laughed loudly, showing incredible arrogance. Any other last words you want to leave? I am a very reasonable person. Ling Han smiled slightly, and stretched out his right hand, crooking a finger at Siang. This provocative action immediately drove the people on the spectators' seats mad. A great many people switched to supporting Ling Han, and began calling out Li Long, Li Long. You dare to snatch my popularity. Siang was infuriated, and with a bounce of his foot, the colossal object that was the battle armor immediately rushed towards Ling Han. Sure, a sword actually appeared in the hand of the battle armor, but it was not an actual object. Instead, it was made up of light. This was called a particle sword, and Ling Han had heard about it from Wally. It was an object of pure energy, possessing frightening destructive power. In this aspect, it was not inferior to any celestial tool. Furthermore, a particle sword was not a solid object, and was not so easily parried. Thus, it was very hard to deal with. Previously, though Yang Zhishuan had also possessed battle armor, he did not have equipment like a particle sword, so it was clearly inferior to this battle armor of Siang. From the very start, Siang was using the battle armor and particle sword, clearly showing that he intended to settle this quickly. Ling Han had no lack of understanding of battle armor. This kind of thing possessed very strong recovery abilities. He could either burst out with power that was strong enough to destroy it completely, or he could only slowly wear it down to the point that the energy of the battle armor was completely exhausted. Otherwise, the side possessing the battle armor would be completely unbeatable. Ling Han naturally would not choose the second option. He balled his hand into a fist, and then also leaped forth, going forward to greet Siang. Peng! Ling Han's speed was even higher, with him arriving first though he had started out later. His fist landed onto the chest portion of the battle armor, and with a wave of his right hand, his strike landed on the left wrist of the battle armor, easily pulling out the particle sword. Siang was shocked. He had not expected that Ling Han could be so fast, and his power was also very amazing. Even if Siang was boosted with the battle armor, it was still no match for the power of a mere wave of Ling Han's hand. However, Sai Ang immediately smirked coldly because this battle armor was not what it had been before. Recently, he had spent an exorbitant sum to upgrade this battle armor. It was no longer a 3-star battle armor, but was rather 4 stars, which could assist a 4th heaven celestial king in battle. He was unable to fully unleash the might of the battle armor, but in terms of defense, it would be very hard for even a peak stage 4th heaven celestial king to pose a threat to the defenses of the battle armor. Naturally, there was no need for him to worry then. This was a secret. He had not told anyone, because he was ambitious, and was not satisfied with just playing the role of a sniper. He wanted to attempt achieving the honor of Blood Marshal King. In that way, with every battle he fought, the fees paid for his appearance would be multiplied a good few times over. You want to penetrate my battle armor? You must really be dreaming. Crack, 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 crack. However, before he even finished his thought, he suddenly heard the sound of breaking from his battle armor. It was incredibly sharp to his ears. Boom, the spectators on the seats had gone absolutely crazy. What had they seen? Sai Ang's battle armor had been directly punched through with a single punch from Ling Han. That guy was really too barbaric, directly taking apart a battle armor with bare hands. Gods! Chapter 2567, Extending Row of Successive Victories. Chapter 2567, Extending Row of Successive Victories. This was really too astonishing. Though battle armor was made from a very, very small amount of divine metal, it was still born from a concentrated effort of a technological realm. From a certain aspect, technology was actually also a cultivation technique, as it was also about how to use power. High-tier battle armor was extremely sturdy. Otherwise, if it were to be damaged at the first moment in a battle, what use would it be then? But now, everyone was gaping widely, watching numbly as Ling Han tore apart the battle armor with his bare hands. That was truly barbaric, violent, and too shocking. Even Tang Yuan and Zhao Shuang were rendered speechless. Ling Han truly was an extreme, powerful man. However, only after a while, Tang Yuan laughed loudly, and said, "Zhao Shuang, thank you for your 3 Brahmin celestial flowers. Added together, I have earned 6 of them from you." Zhao Shuang was speechless. The gaze he directed at Ling Han was filled with anger. Why was this guy so strong? Why couldn't he just die obediently? This is only the 6th battle. He regained his composure. Subsequently, the tournament authorities will deploy even more elites. To attain the title of Blood Marshal King is as difficult as trying to ascend the heavens. However, Tang Yuan was filled with confidence in Ling Han this time. "Zhao Shuang, then we'll just make another wager later." Zhao Shuang did not reply. He was absolutely uncertain about Ling Han's strength at present, nor did he know what kind of elite the tournament authorities would deploy next, so how could he dare to take up this wager so rashly? Furthermore, Brahmin Celestial Flower was too valuable. By now, he had already lost 6 in succession, and who knew how harshly his old man would be scolding him. How could Zhao Shuang possibly dare to be rash again? However, he was sure that the tournament authorities would definitely mobilize a true elite in the 10th battle to stop Ling Han from becoming a Blood Marshal King. Zhao Shuang would bet on the 10th battle, and win everything he had lost back in one stroke. In fact, he was determined to win a much greater amount than that. In the arena, as Ling Han ripped and tore the armor apart, Sai Ang appeared in front of him, his expression filled with terror. He was like a completely helpless beauty that had encountered a pervert. He could only shriek shrilly and panic. His whole body was shaking, and even the blonde hair on his skin seemed to be dancing. Ling Han smiled faintly. "What were you saying just now? I didn't hear very clearly, so please repeat." How could Sai Ang dare to repeat his words? He was far more shocked than any other. Firstly, he was directly involved, and it was he that was facing the immediate danger of death. Secondly, only he knew that his battle armor had truly been upgraded, and far surpassed the level of 3rd heaven. Ling Han was a monster. Why was it he, Sai Ang, that came to fight him? "Hihi, I was joking around. Brother, don't take it seriously." Sai Ang forced out a smile. Ling Han laughed loudly, and patted Sai Ang's shoulder. "Then I am just playing around with you as well. Pa, With a strike of his palm, Siang was directly split apart with a peng. His legs, arms, and head were all removed, as if he had been torn apart by 5 horses. However, how could a celestial king die so easily? In fact, as long as Ling Han did not continue his attack, Siang could just piece his body back again, and not even a serious injury would be left behind. Brother, as long as you are happy. Siang still had to force a grin. He did not beg for mercy. That was because forfeiting was useless in the tournament grounds. If he wanted to live, he could only run to the safety passage by himself. Ling Han cracked a grin. Sure then. He delivered another palm strike. Peng, Siang's body had been completely turned into a mist of blood. Ayo, I've used too much force, Ling Han mumbled. Naturally, he would not take it to heart. His opponent had aimed to kill him from the very beginning, and there was no need to have mercy on this kind of character. Li Long wins, the commentator announced loudly. Li Long. Li Long. Li Long. Everyone was shouting Ling Han's alias, excited and exhilarated. Though Ling Han knew that these people were actually very sick, and very psychotic as well, to have over 10,000 celestial kings cheering in such mania and frenzy for him still caused some ripple in his emotions as he was influenced by their mood. No wonder the people here were so crazy. If one battled here for too long, probably even the most normal person would be driven mad, right? Ling Han immediately strengthened his resolve. The purpose he had come to battle here was for the sake of greater strength, and not for bloodshed, nor to satisfy some inner vanity of his or the expectations of others. He left the tournament ground. Tang Yuan personally came to greet him, unlike previously, when he would just leave by himself, and only host a celebration for him when they were back at the courtyard. The victory of the 6th battle had extraordinary significance. Ling Han still submitted. He naturally would not take this seriously. Tang Yuan was the type to mercilessly become hostile. Now, it was only because Ling Han still had value for him to exploit that he was willing to coax him, but as long as there was a conflict with his interests, he would definitely abandon Ling Han without any hesitation. Tang Yuan was slightly restless. He had taken too many losses from Lu Li, and was determined to get his own back. Ling Han was his ray of hope. With this kind of prerequisite, he did not mind giving Ling Han the highest level of treatment. This caused those lackeys of his to be extremely jealous, and the gazes they directed at Ling Han were extremely unfriendly. However, Ling Han's royal favor was presently strong. They did not dare do anything against Ling Han. In fact, some people even called Ling Han Brother Long. Tang Yuan was hurrying things along, wanting to arrange the 7th battle as quickly as possible. However, the tournament was the territory of the Azure Ghost Celestial King. He could exert some pressure, but if he actually wanted to call the shots, he had to be dreaming. Half a month later, the opponent for the 7th battle was finally confirmed. This time, Tang Yuan was informed in advance. The opponent's name was Li He. Li He. After hearing this name, Tang Yuan became serious again. He had a considerable amount of intel in his possession, and he could find out about all kinds of information about Li He just by flipping through it. This man had once obtained 9 successive wins in the tournament, and he himself was a 4th heaven celestial king, being much stronger than Siang had been. No worries. Li Long has battle prowess on the level of the Blood Martial King. Even if he has a disadvantage of a cultivation level, he would still definitely win. Tang Yuan boosted his own confidence. The next day, the 2nd battle began. When the commentator had introduced the fighters on both sides, all the spectators began to support Li He all over again. After all, Ling Han had only shown his outstanding ability, but Li He was a veteran here. He had gone through hundreds of battles and still survived. In itself, this was a kind of display of strength. Li He was a middle-aged man with a thin build, 4 streaks of peculiar light wrapped around him. Both of his arms were extremely dried up and thin, and dark as well, as if they were wooden logs that had been charred black. But as they moved, cold light reflected off of them like they were metallic. Ling Han saw very clearly that the man's palms and wrists were covered with seals. They were actually very vague, but they could not deceive his eyes. If you don't want to die, then crawl through here, and get lost. Li He demanded. He spread open his legs, and pointed between his legs with a finger. His meaning could not be clearer. Faked battles were definitely forbidden in the tournament grounds. It was absolutely forbidden to forfeit without even a battle. Even if one escaped from this battle arena, they would still be apprehended by the tournament authorities and executed. Li He was only humiliating Ling Han. Hearing these words, the people on the spectators' seats were greatly excited, screaming shrilly. Ling Han looked around. Were these people really celestial kings? Why was it that there was no difference between them and ordinary people at the marketplace? Was the influence of surroundings really so strong? Brat, I am talking to you, and you actually dare to act as if you haven't heard me. Li He uttered coldly. Do you know how the last person who angered me died? Ling Han smiled slightly. How? Chapter 2568, Suffering the Consequences of His Own Actions. Chapter 2568, Suffering the Consequences of His Own Actions. Very terribly. Li He revealed a grin filled with cruelty. With a wave of his right hand, a green snake immediately slithered out of his sleeve. Then, it was a centipede, followed by a scorpion. They were all close together, and all of them were venomous creatures. Soon, you will be slowly devoured bit by these precious pets of mine, Li He said. The flesh and blood of a celestial king are very nutritious, and will help these precious pets grow even faster. Freak. Ling Han nodded. He had not encountered anyone who was normal here. Then, he should just kill him. There was really nothing much he wanted to say to this kind of person that played around with poisonous creatures. With a flick of his finger, a flash of sword chi swept out. The green snake was instantly beheaded by the sword chi. If it had only lost its head, the green snake would not die, but this flash of sword chi from Ling Han contained his martial intent as well. To the green snake, this was a deadly disaster, immediately crushing its mind. Mind destroyed, physical body crushed. That definitely meant death. Little Ching. Li He looked as if it was his son that had died, and immediately cried out in grief. He was even really close to tearing up. After howling for a while, he raised his head, his eyes filled with viciousness. You actually dare to kill my precious, I will give you a tragic end. Ling Han smiled faintly. You speak as if you were originally very kind. You will not die too easily. Li He charged over. As he stretched out both arms, his thin, wood-like hands suddenly glowed, and actually turned golden. It was like they were two tiny suns, so bright that it was blinding, and no one could look directly at them. Li He smirked coldly. This was a secret technique that he had cultivated. The regulations of metal were contained in the light, which could wound the eyes and injure the divine sense of his opponent. Anyone who did not know his background would very easily fall for this. Next, he had another successive move, and it was guaranteed that he would be able to easily take down his opponent. By then, he would not easily allow Ling Han to die, but would rather have those precious pets of his slowly devour Ling Han alive. Hearing the latter's pained screams would cause him great excitement and exhilaration. He was smirking coldly, yet suddenly saw an iron fist was flying towards him. What's going on? He was stunned, and finally reacted. This was a counterattack from Ling Han. How was this possible? Being affected by his secret technique, Ling Han was actually still able to throw out a punch so accurately. However, this thought had just formed when, peng, his face immediately sustained a heavy punch. Frightening power instantly reverberated throughout his body. There was also an indescribable streak of martial intent, which made him feel as if he was facing a noble and proud ninth heaven celestial king. This was not because Ling Han's cultivation level was too high, but rather because the Tao he cultivated was too majestic. He was clearly just in third heaven, but actually gave off the pressure that should be accorded to a ninth heaven celestial king. Peng. Then, Li He landed heavily on the ground, and felt as if every single bone in his body had been crushed into dust. He could not even muster up the slightest bit of strength. Ling Han appeared above him, looking down on him from above with a calm expression. There was not the slightest hint of pride on his face, as if defeating Li He was something that could not be any more normal. The gap in strength was really too wide. How could there be such a freakish person in this world? Ling Han smiled slightly. I have always been a very fair person. However you wanted to treat me, I will return the same treatment. Li He faltered at first, and then realization suddenly dawned on him. To his terror, he discovered that the eyes of those precious pets of his were shining viciously as they stared fixatedly at him. To be more exact, they were looking at his flesh and blood. This was the flesh and blood of a celestial king. To them, those were very nutritious. No, he had just spoken when, a poisonous scorpion had already hopped onto his face. Its two pincers gripped his tongue, and it severed his tongue with a scissoring motion, and crawled into his mouth. With it leading the way, even more poisonous creatures crawled into his body through his mouth. Ugh! Li He released a muffled groan, his face instantly twitching. Not only were these poisonous creatures devouring him alive, they themselves also carried powerful poison, causing him tremendous agony. Initially, this was the agony that he would watch his defeated opponents suffer, while he himself laughed loudly by the sidelines. However, after he traded places with his victims, he finally knew just how cruel this was. He swore that he would definitely kill all the venomous creatures if he could survive this. Eat him! Eat him! Eat him! Yet, the spectators had all erupted. Actually, they did not care whom these venomous creatures would be eating. It was fine as long as the spectacle was bloody and gory enough. Li He was both furious and terrified. These spectators had always cheered for him, but now they were actually cheering on those poisonous creatures, telling them to eat him faster, which was something he could not accept. However, he was even more terrified because he really would be devoured alive by these poisonous creatures. From then, he would no longer exist in this world. However, with the numbing effects of the poison, he could not release any sound at all. But his consciousness was extraordinarily alert, and he could feel every single detail of the agony. This almost drove him mad. All the bones in his body had already been broken, but his body was actually still shivering, and his skin was still twitching, which showed just how great the agony that he was presently suffering was. Ling Han waved a hand. Li He was immediately destroyed, and those poisonous creatures were also crushed. Just the look of them was disgusting. No. On the spectators' seats, a great many people shouted. Why did he have to kill Li He so quickly? He should have allowed him to be eaten alive completely. Only that would be fun enough. These people turned around and jeered at Ling Han, wanting nothing more than to release another swarm of poisonous creatures to devour Ling Han, compensating for their disappointment. Ling Han swept his gaze coldly over these people. The more he came into contact with them, the more he understood that the people here had all lost their minds. There was absolutely no need to have any kind of sympathy for them. One dying meant one better. If any single one of them escaped, just how astonishing could the damage caused by a celestial king be? After the commentator announced Ling Han's victory, Ling Han left the battle zone and went to the lobby backstage. This time, Tang Yuan did not come to see him. After all, he considered himself the master here. He could occasionally reward his subordinate, but how could he constantly humble himself to that level? What if it caused his subordinate to gain a puffed-up opinion of themselves, and they did not even take him, the master, seriously anymore? He made quick arrangements. Once Ling Han achieved another 3 wins, he could be crowned as the Blood Martial King, and challenge the Blood Martial King that belonged to Lu Li. Day after day passed. This time, the time taken was even longer. Over a month later, the opponent for the 8th match was confirmed. Sima Qing. Sima Qing. When Tang Yuan had hold of the data about the opponent, he was surprised. That was because this Sima Qing was actually about equal in strength to Li He. They were both 4th Heaven Celestial Kings, and had also previously gained 9 successive wins in a row. If there was any difference, it was that Sima Qing had attained 9 successive wins more times than Li He had, but that was only just 2 times more than the latter. Li He couldn't even survive a single exchange with Ling Han. Then even if Sima Qing was slightly stronger than Ling Han, so what? Just how many strikes from Ling Han could be blocked? This was practically gifting another victory straight to Ling Han. Could it be that the tournament authorities have deliberately given some leeway for the sake of father? Tang Yuan stroked his chin. However, Li Long is indeed very strong. Throwing the match in this way is actually not too wrong, either. The next day, Ling Han's 8th match began. As expected, when the commentator had finished his introductions of the information of both sides, the spectators erupted in booing and jeers. Wasn't this just deliberately throwing the match? Fake battle. Fake battle. Fake battle, everyone was shouting loudly. Anyone who dared to fight a faked battle should be executed. If he could take it for his own, and let the divine demon sword devour it, the level of the divine demon sword would definitely be able to advance another step ahead. Divine metal was rare and limited, and had to be accumulated piece by piece. Humph, even if you have still hidden your strength, under the suppression of the celestial tool, everything is meaningless, Sima Qing declared disdainfully. He was not underestimating Ling Han, but rather had too much confidence in this halberd of 10,000 gowls. This was a precious tool that had once been used by a 9th heaven celestial king, so how could it not be awesome? Come. Ling Han crooked a finger at his opponent. So what if it was a celestial tool? It would still depend on who the user was. How foolish. Sima Qing humphed. He strode towards Ling Han, but his pace wasn't very fast. With every step he took, the celestial tool was awakening, imposing great pressure on Ling Han. This was deliberate. He wanted to make Ling Han shudder in fear because he knew that he was no match for Ling Han in a fair battle. Being able to bully an elite like Ling Han like this, he felt extremely pleased with himself. Ling Han's expression was solemn. Though he had pushed the indestructible heaven scroll to the 6th layer of the indestructible celestial king physique, it was still no match for divine metal. If he confronted divine metal head-on, he would definitely be experiencing a loss. However, the divine demon sword was one of his trump cards, and he did not want to reveal it so quickly. Just in time, he wanted to try fighting in such dire conditions. This should be able to greatly improve his battle prowess. Peng! 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 Sima Qing was getting closer and closer. The seals on the halberd of 10,000 gowls lit up one after another. Skulls appeared, floating towards Ling Han, and opening their mouths to bite at him. Ling Han balled his hand into a fist and threw a punch. Peng! A skull was immediately crushed. However, he, too, shuddered slightly. This skull contained great power enough to affect him. Furthermore, this was just a single skull. More skulls were appearing, and launching an offensive against Ling Han. Ha 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 ha, in front of the halberd of 10,000 gowls, how much are you worth? Sima Qing brandished the halberd and attacked. Though these skulls could pose a threat to Ling Han, it was still necessary to attack directly with the celestial tool in order to truly defeat, or even kill, Ling Han. Ling Han stretched out a hand, and grabbed a streak of great Tao, which he smashed towards Sima Qing. This was completely unreasonable as he was directly using brute force to suppress his opponent. But Sima Qing knew that there was a very wide gap in strength between him and Ling Han. If he traded injury for injury with Ling Han, then even if the halberd of 10,000 gowls could kill Ling Han, Sima Qing would definitely die as well after sustaining a strike from Ling Han. Hence, he had to parry. He brandished the halberd of 10,000 gowls to meet the attack. Boom, the celestial tool clashed with great Tao, causing a burst of ripples through space. Sima Qing felt like even his arms were trembling, and if it was not for the fact that the halberd of 10,000 gowls had already activated, dispersing the majority of power behind Ling Han's attack, this clash would definitely be many times even more frightening, which caused a chill to come over his heart. Just how strong was this man exactly? However, now that things had reached this point, it was apparent that Sima Qing could no longer retreat. Otherwise, even if Ling Han was willing to spare him, Sima Qing would still be called to account by the tournament authorities. Oh, we've already even given you a celestial tool, and you actually still shamefully surrendered and begged for mercy. Die, he roared ferociously, the power of a celestial king surging. Sharp green blades appeared from the halberd of 10,000 gowls one after another. This was him having inserted his own power inside the celestial tool, further boosting its might. Otherwise, he did not think that his own power could actually pose any threat to Ling Han. Whom can you kill? Ling Han smirked coldly. He unfurled his Dao, an action very smooth and incredibly natural. Even if Sima Qing had a celestial tool in hand, he still appeared really backed up. It was not that the halberd of 10,000 gowls was not strong, but rather that Sima Qing was too weak. He was unable to fully unleash the might of the celestial tool. So strange. Li Long is clearly only a third heaven celestial king, but why do I have the feeling that he seems like a supreme celestial king of ninth heaven? I have that kind of feeling too. Ah, so do I. Everyone on the spectators' seats was crying out in shock. They were indeed insane, but they were all genuine celestial kings. Which of them was an ordinary character? Cultivation level cannot be faked. Then there is only one possibility. This brat has comprehended his own Tao. Extraordinary genius. He is truly an extraordinary genius. Sima Qing went all out, but the gap in power was too wide. Even if he exerted even more effort, it was useless. He was very soon suppressed. Ling Han used various kinds of regulations proficiently, bringing extreme suffering to Sima Qing. If it were not for the fact that the celestial tool in his grip was capable of slicing apart all types of regulations, Sima Qing would not have been able to block Ling Han's strikes at all. Yet the only question now was just how long he would be able to hold on for. Turning the situation around? That was absolutely impossible, unless the halberd of 10,000 gowls could activate fully, but that surely was unrealistic. Sima Qing did not dare continue fighting. He began retreating. Now that the battle had come this far, it was enough to prove that he had done his best, and the possibility that he had gone easy on Ling Han did not exist. Furthermore, he was sure that he would be killed by Ling Han if the battle continued. He fled, but Ling Han had already entered into an optimal stage. Regulations manifested into chains, which wrapped around Sima Qing tightly and securely. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.